Los Angeles, a city of saints, a city of sinners. Why, I lived in this town all my life. Seen things no man would believe. I've been on the force 75 years. But this story isn't about me. This story is about a man named Cole Phelps. My name is Bug to the Plug, and this is the black sheep of the Rockstar family. Also, I'm not a detective, and this isn't Los Angeles. It's safe to say that Rockstar has published some of the best games of all time. I immediately think about the Grand Theft Auto series and how their parodized take on modern America took the gaming world by storm. Or the Red Dead Redemption franchise, which are huge love letters to classic westerns and some of the most revered titles by Rockstar, receiving acclaim both commercially and critically. But one of their lesser talked about games, and one I think deserves more praise even now, is their 2011 action-adventure detective game, LA Noire. Now, before this video continues, I have to say, I know this isn't a Rockstar game. It was developed by Team Bandai in collaboration with Rockstar, but seeing as though that company unfortunately no longer exists, my assumption is that Rockstar stepped in to help them finish it, as the game was revealed way back in 2005, but wasn't released until 2011. So not to take anything away from the incredible talent that Team Bandai put into this project, but for simplicity's sake, this game belongs to the Rockstar family. I've been playing this game for the past month leading up to this video, finally completing it a few days ago, and I thoroughly enjoyed my experience way more than I thought I would. The game has its quirks and funny moments, but for the most part, it's pretty real and grounded, and I love that about the game. It's such a deviation from anything I've played by Rockstar before. You can guess by the title, the game takes place in California, LA to be exact, and a pretty accurate representation, as accurate as it can be in a video game at least. You can probably also tell by the name that this game takes place earlier in time, like in the 40s earlier, clearly drawing inspiration from post-World War II film and TV show noir crime dramas. I love games that take place in different times, but I don't think I've ever played one set during this time. Everything feels so grounded and accurate, from the cars to the way people talk to the clothes they wear. The more you play, the more immersed you become, as the game honestly sells to the player the era in which it takes place, from the economy to the infrastructure and of course, race and gender relations. The fact that this game takes place post-World War II actually plays a significant part in the story. But before I get there, let's talk about LA Noire's core gameplay. Unlike most, if not all of the games in Rockstar's catalog, we actually play as the law this time, specifically an LAPD detective. We play as Cole Phelps, a character who I'll touch on more later in the narrative part of this video. But the core gameplay involves investigating crime scenes and finding clues in order to solve the case. Now narratively, the case will come to a conclusion no matter what, as there are a handful of mandatory clues you must discover to progress. But finding more not only makes it easier for the player to solve the case, but you'll get a higher score when the case is complete. Also, the way the game goes about the investigation process is really cool and something I wouldn't have even thought of. While investigating a case, to discover clues, soft music will play in the background, and once you've found all of them, the music will cue the player and stop, which is a rather ingenious way of letting the player know that they've found everything, rather than some large text on screen or even another character pointing out that you're done. Speaking of which, another cool thing that keeps you in the immersion, rather than text popping up on screen with tips and hints, if you are ever confused about your next move, if you interact with your partner, they will cue you into what you have to do next. But investigation is just one side of the coin in LA Noire. On the other side, probably my favorite of the two, are the interrogations. In nearly every case, you will have to interrogate a person of interest to progress further in the investigations. The very first interrogation happens when you're just a traffic cop, acting as a tutorial for the interrogation mechanics. I have to be honest, I failed at least a dozen times on the tutorial one, as I was really confused on how the mechanic worked, and I just kept getting yelled at by Captain Donnelly.
You disappoint me, Cole Phelps. Get back in there and raise some lumps, boy! I need a confession!
But I gotta say, it didn't take long at all for me to get the hang of it. Doesn't mean all of my interrogations were successes, but I always got the answers I was looking for. And plus, I think it adds even more weight to the game and to the mechanic, as unlike the tutorial investigation, you don't get a do-over. How did the interrogation system work exactly? I'm very glad you asked. You see, one of LA Noire's biggest selling points and the coolest feature is the facial animations. It used motion scan technology, resulting in highly realistic and nuanced facial expressions, and these characters and NPCs look better than most games that come out today. Granted, some look better than others, but they still look great. This face scanning technology was so when interrogating someone, we needed to pay attention to their facial movement to determine if they're lying or telling the truth. If the person in question would dart their eyes back and forth or look around after getting asked a question, that'd usually be a telltale sign that they're lying. In contrast, if they are stone-faced with a soft tone of voice after a question, that probably means they're telling the truth. I use words like usually and probably because the further you progress through the game, those telltale signs become just a layer as you genuinely have to use the evidence you've gathered and the clues you found and your actual intuition to determine if someone's lying. You respond to them with a good cop or a bad cop response. If someone is being less than cooperative or their face straight up gives away that they're lying, you may want to go with bad cop. Or if they're incredibly cooperative, or maybe they leave off a detail accidentally, you go good cop. But again, the further you progress through the story, it isn't as easy as it sounds. Misreading a suspect's response could result in them lying even further, deterring your investigation even more. There's also a third option, accuse. And accuse is only if you have evidence to back up that accusation. Other than that, it's never the best option of the three. And this goes back to what I said earlier, making sure you have all the clues in a case you need to present with an accusation. But because this system is incredibly robust and contains many variables, the game actually includes an online feature, which allows you to use intuition points, a point you obtain when leveling up by successfully completing interrogations and finding clues, to give the player two choices if they're having trouble making a decision, either removing an option or showing the player's stats to reveal which option players chose the most. I rarely use this feature, but it is extremely helpful. If you're still not sold, the game does feature combat, both gun and hand-to-hand, but they aren't the star of the show here. Even though they're present, they're only presented in certain points of the story, and even though they have some pretty sweet mechanics, I always get excited when I get to fight someone hand-to-hand because you can feel every hit land, and there's also a dodge and grab options for a variety of the ways you fight. And when you're about done, you can finish off your opponent with a devastating uppercut, and it never gets old. As far as the gunplay, I'm sad to say it's pretty lackluster. You'll get into a handful of shootouts, but they all end pretty quickly and provide no real satisfaction. This isn't to say that it's not engaging though, as before a shootout you can retrieve a gun from the back of your cop car, a mechanic that is criminally underused, and while shooting enemies they will run and relocate depending on your location, occasionally trying to flank you and blind fire, and your guns can run out of ammo, but you can swap them out for a dropped enemy gun. In addition to the main cases of the story, Noire does have side missions. On your way to a main objective, you receive dispatch calls about thefts, domestic disputes, and I even got one about a potential suicide. I didn't do too many of these in my first playthrough, but they add more life and depth to the game's world, and they literally take 5 minutes or less at a time. Funnily enough, the drive there may take you longer than the actual mission. And one more thing before we move on, the driving. The driving in Noire really aims for a realism factor, with us, a cop, having to avoid collisions and obey the majority of traffic laws. I even noticed cars on the streets have turn signals, and I'm sure other games have those, but not too many I've played. Also, I know this game has a Rockstar label attached to it, but remember, you're playing as a cop, and any reckless driving will be documented, and you buy into it. I can't 100% say that I've obeyed every single traffic law, but I always looked out for civilians and city property when I drove. I even found a cool little detail where if I put my sirens on, civilians and cars would get out of the way faster, as they would in real life. And I say when I drive, because the game does have a fast travel mechanic that is amazing. Simply by holding the button to enter the car, instead of tapping it, signals your partner to drive. You can do this as much as you want, as long as there is a set destination, except you can't do this all the time. During crucial story moments such as car chases, the game will force you into the driver's seat automatically. Also, you immediately lose access to participating in side quests, discovering hidden vehicles, and hearing unique conversations between you and your partners. And there it is. Convenience gained, mechanic preserved. A simple trade-off for a really great mechanic. I pointed out earlier that unlike most Rockstar games, we are the law. But that doesn't make the gameplay any less fun. I've stated that there's plenty of shootouts and fights to get into, but one of my favorite things that happens are the chases, because nothing says 1940s detective more than a good old-fashioned chase. Whether you're on foot or in a car, whenever one of these happens, it pulls you right back in like the game demands your attention. 1 second you could be inspecting a house or a restaurant, and someone cuts and runs out of nowhere. I enjoy foot chases, and they sometimes include another criminally underused mechanic, the ability to stop suspects from running by aiming at them for a few seconds, prompting you to fire a warning shot, causing the chase to end with no fatal casualties. I do prefer car chases though, as they challenge the player to cause as little damage to their car and the city, making them more engaging, and oh yeah, it's a car chase. What makes it more fun is often, depending on the case, your partner will shoot while you drive, only adding to the engagement, providing players with a really fun gameplay loop. Okay, now that you know how the game works, it's time to get into the meat of what makes LA Noire so good, the story. The game revolves around revered detective and former Marine Corps lieutenant in World War, Cole Phelps. I just want to say that Cole Phelps is probably one of the most grounded and believable characters I've ever seen in a video game, especially compared to other Rockstar games' protagonists, and I'll touch on why in a bit. Before I talk about the story, I want you to know that I won't be covering every single little thing, as I encourage you to play this game yourself or watch a playthrough of it. Although I will be hitting some, but not all, critical story beats, but there will be a lot, and spoilers ahead, I still encourage you to see the whole thing unfold for yourself. We start off as just an average LAPD patrol officer. However, Cole's ambitions leads him to single-handedly solving a murder case, which impresses the homicide captain, the same one that yelled at you.
Get back in there and raise some lumps, boy! I need a confession!
And he gets you a position as a traffic detective. That's right. It's implied that Cole was a patrol officer for a lot longer than we play as one. The patrol section simply acts as the tutorial for all the mechanics I mentioned earlier. Once you're a traffic detective, we get our second and probably my favorite partner of the game, Stephen Bukowski. That's right, I said second. Our first partner is a guy named Ralph Dunn, but he's very forgettable as he only exists for the first 3 cases in the tutorial section. Additionally, being a traffic detective, we deal with cases ranging from hit and runs to abandoned vehicles containing strange objects that more than not lead to murders. I also forget to mention that because I'm playing the remastered version of it, it contains bonus DLC cases that come with different chapters of the game. To my knowledge, these cases aren't optional, but they fit really well into the story, sometimes even adding more depth to the cases prior. But much like Phelps as a patrol cop, his performance as a traffic cop gains him promotion to the homicide desk, which unfortunately means we have to leave Bukowski, but this isn't the last time we'll see him, fortunately. As a homicide detective, our new captain is... oh no, Captain Donnelly?
Get back in there and raise some lumps, boy! I need a confession!
Thankfully, I think he doesn't remember that. Also, we get a new partner, Finbar Galloway, but he prefers you call him Rusty. You don't want to know what happens to you if you call him Finbar. I don't know if I like him better than Bukowski, but he's probably my second favorite, and the homicide chapter is where you feel the game excels, as not only does every case correspond to the previous one, but we get to see more narratives throughout this chapter. Not just as Cole the detective, but also as Cole the family man and former Marine. In this series of homicide cases, the victims are only women who have been beaten and strangled to death, with some left naked and vandalized, and all of them having a piece of jewelry or article of clothing missing. These cases are becoming so prominent the media gives the serial killer a name, the Black Dahlia Killer. Even if you're on point with your clue finding and investigations, Phelps and Rusty have seemingly no concrete leads to the actual Black Dahlia Killer, until the very end where one of my favorite things happens. The final cases see the Black Dahlia Killer leading you and Rusty on a wild goose chase with notes leading to hints about his location, and the game doesn't tell you these locations once you find the notes. You have to genuinely figure them out yourselves by trial and error or genuine brainstorming, and recall your time spent driving around LA. You of course eventually find the Black Dahlia Killer, and it's a pretty exciting revelation on who it is. I of course will not say to stay true to what I said earlier, but it's a character we met earlier in the story, and even though their motives are insane, the fact is that you murdered several women in cold blood, and now Cole Phelps is the judge, jury, and executioner. Also, side note, you meet Roy Earl, a vice detective who's kind of a jerk, and Elsa Lichtman, a German singer who performs regularly at the Blue Moon nightclub. They become important later. After your success with capturing the Black Dahlia killer, you not only get promoted to a vice cop, but you're also talked about in the newspaper, which is another thing I thought was really cool, is while you're on foot, you can sometimes hear NPCs say, "Hey, there's the cop that solved that murder," kind of subtly letting the players know how revered and respected Cole is, not only among other cops, but civilians as well. Speaking of newspapers, another aspect of LA Noire's overarching narrative are these newspapers that can be found in certain cases as you progress through the game that provide a whole nother story that's taking place in the background and ultimately will come to a head at the same time as the main story. There are 13 of them in total. I think I've found like 8 or 9 my first go around, so keep an eye out for them while you're playing. Speaking of overarching narratives, between certain cases we also see flashbacks to Cole's time in the war as a former Marine and get a bit of insight into his relationships with fellow cadets and when he was forced to make tough decisions not only about the lives of his fellow men, but civilians too. And it's never unwelcome. Even though Cole is our main character, I at first felt that a lot of things about him were up for interpretation, but these flashbacks really provide insight into the man he was and what made him this way today. As a vice cop, we partner up with Roy Earl, probably my least favorite partner in the game so far. Roy tries to convince Cole that he essentially made it as a vice cop and to see every suspect in the case from now as low-level scum, essentially. So on top of being extremely egotistical and douchey, it's also later heavily implied that Roy's a racist and a big misogynist. And I know he's a white man in the 40s, but Jesus Christ, he sure checks all those boxes, doesn't he? We work to get a bunch of military-grade morphine off the street that Cole, of course, recognizes from his time in the Marines, but upon doing so, he starts to unravel a much larger story involving LA's elite and some crooked cops, as the distribution, buying, and selling of this morphine seems to be as easy as buying coffee in the 40s. But there has to be something more here. I mean, in the last case of this chapter, random shootings start to occur all over the city, but these are targeted, leading Cole to believe this may not just be about morphine. Roy urges Cole against his larger ambitions, assuring him that there's nothing there. But the closer he gets to uncovering the truth, that's when Roy tells. You see, Cole has been having an affair with Elsa, that German singer from the jazz club I mentioned earlier, and not only does this make the hero Cole Phelps and the entire police department look bad, but apparently adultery was a criminal offense in the 40s, and Roy, not wanting any of his secret dealings to get out, releases the dirt he has on Cole. And thanks to a quick Google search and 30 seconds of research, adultery is still a crime in some states, and I actually did not know that, so that kind of blew my mind as much as finding out having an affair can have criminal consequences can. Anyway, I digress. So because of this, Cole gets a demotion to the arson squad. Yeah, a demotion. The game's been doing such a great job at painting Cole as this hero, an exceptional detective who can do no wrong, getting praise after every case. So, this subversion of expectations works masterfully. He also gets a divorce and can see his kids. Side note, I love how the first time we see Cole's wife is when their marriage is literally falling apart. It's something that there's something there, I just can't figure it out yet, but it's interesting how she's talked about the whole game. But at the first time we see her, she's like kicking him out the house. It's great. Well, it's not great for him, but it's still pretty great. As a member of the arson squad, Phelps is constantly berated for his affair, and we get a new partner, Herschel Biggs, who also at this point wants nothing to do with Cole. But I'll still take him over Roy any day. But if the name didn't give it away, we deal with a bunch of fire-related cases. And I find this especially interesting because of Cole's reputation for cracking cases being put on the arson squad. As if the arsonists did their job right, there isn't much evidence to be investigated. But the ambitions of Cole Phelps leads him to making another huge connection to the house fires in a housing company by the name of Elysian Fields. Founded and operated by a wealthy business tycoon and man not knowing whether he should smile or cry, Leland Monroe. Cole is told explicitly not to pursue, so he seeks the help of a former Marine comrade turned private detective, the game's secret second protagonist, albeit for the only in-game, Jack Kelso. Kelso's portion of the game is small, but packed with a lot of interesting details and great action sequences. I also love that at first, Jack is just doing Cole a favor and sees investigating Legion fields as a waste of time. Though his discoveries are a lot bigger than what he initially thought, as it also leads to him to investigate the Suburban Redevelopment Fund, which is supposed to provide affordable housing for World War II veterans, is, surprise surprise, illegitimate, and they even use faulty building equipment, which explains the need to want to destroy them later on for an insurance payout. Its other purpose is to defraud the US federal government, run by several local businessmen, dignitaries, as well as Leland Monroe. The further Kelso dives into this conspiracy, the more danger he gets in, as while he's investigating one house, he's jumped by a bunch of Leland's goons and kidnapped. Thankfully, we escape, and Jack seeks the help of Cole and Elsa. After getting patched up, Jack takes some of his former Marine buddies and storms Leland Monroe's mansion. And I kid you not, it's probably the best shootout in the entire game. Forget what I said earlier about them being too short and unsatisfying. This one stands out. After finding and shooting Leland, Kelso discovers who's been doing their dirty work to set these houses on fire, and it also happens to be the same person who kidnaps Elsa after she's been knocked out by a co-conspirator in the Suburban Redevelopment Fund scam. What ensues is a race between Kelso, Phelps, Biggs, and the LAPD to the LA River to rescue Elsa from this crazy kidnapping arsonist. After another great shootout in the river tunnels, we eventually rescue Elsa, but Cole unfortunately meets his fate. How? Well, you just have to play to find out. Well, there you have it. I think I clearly and kinda non-spoilery described the narrative of LA Noire, but there are so many stories and overarching narrative that come together at the end of this game so beautifully in a way I haven't seen too many games do. Granted, I will say as it pertains to the Suburban Redevelopment Fund, not everyone involved faces justice, and again, I think it works better that way. And I can believe that. I can also believe that Cole Phelps is a human being. As a character, he's tremendous. As a detective, he's tremendous. But maybe not the best person. That's a big reason I love the military flashbacks, as they are such a great way of letting us know more about the type of man he is, so when he does something in the story that may seem out of character, it really isn't because we know what he's capable of. He genuinely feels real. He has flaws and unlikable traits that go hand in hand with the good stuff about him, making him feel like a really well-balanced character. I didn't even talk about every character for the sake of keeping this as spoiler-free as possible, but all of them are equally as important and interesting as both Phelps and Kelso. Like Dr. Harlan Fontaine, played by Peter Blomquist, who also plays Micah Bell in another popular Rockstar title, Red Dead Redemption 2. The Doctor is a co-conspirator of the whole Suburban Redevelopment Fund, and he's seen in stories in the newspapers you can find, and also at certain points in the story. There are so many characters like him, and behind these characters are exceptional actors. The performances of Aaron Staton as Cole Phelps, Gil McKinney as Jack Kelso, Adam J. Harrington as Roy Earl, and even Andrew Connolly as Captain Donnelly.
Get back in there and raise some lumps, boy! I need a confession!
Are all phenomenal, and the acting chops of this entire cast is unbelievable. I look forward to cutscenes because it feels like I'm watching a 40s crime drama. I buy into these performances. They bring such great nuances and subtlety to these characters that you can't help it. Not just the main cast either. Every suspect or person of interest, every NPC, it's like everyone bought their A game this time around, genuinely feeling like a real world with real people in it. LA Noire is a captivating and immersive experience that successfully blends detective work, investigation, and action. Its meticulously crafted 1940s LA setting, supported by the groundbreaking motion scan technology, creates a visually stunning and authentic atmosphere, to the attention to detail in crime scene investigation and challenging interrogations at a level of realism and depth to the gameplay. The branching narrative structure and the moral ambiguity of these characters make for a compelling story that keeps players engaged throughout. The game's combination of linear storytelling and self-contained cases strikes a good balance, allowing players to unravel a larger conspiracy while experiencing the satisfaction of solving individual cases. While the driving and combat mechanics may not be as refined as in other games, they still serve their purpose and don't just detract significantly from the overall experience. The open world exploration adds an extra layer of immersion, providing players with opportunities for optional activities and encounters. LA Noire is a standout title in its genre, and with its strong narrative and stunning visuals, it makes it a must-play for fans of crime dramas and detective stories. And also, if you're just really into good games. Whew. And there you have it, folks. There you have it. My clear and not so concise review of LA Noire. This was really fun to do. I genuinely have been playing this game for a few weeks. I play this and like in conjunction with a bunch of other games for future videos, but I had a lot of fun with this one, and I had a lot of fun making this video. It's a long time coming. I said first playthrough a lot in this video because I definitely plan on returning to it. I want to know what you guys think. I played this game really late, you know what I mean? Big ups to Team Bandai for working on it. Big props to Rockstar for also working on it, publishing it, helping them finish it. This is an experience like no other. It's one of those games where I wish I would have played earlier around the time it came out, but I had no idea this game existed, so I'm excited to have it this time around, and I assume you clicked on this video because you know about it, or maybe you didn't know about it, or maybe you just subscribed and you watched my channel and was gonna watch this video anyway. Either way, I appreciate you sticking around this long. Let me know what you thought of it and how it can improve, and let me know down in the comments. Sorry, I've been talking for a very long time. Let me know down in the comments below if you've played LA Noire, if you're going to play LA Noire, what you like about it, what you don't like about it. I really want to know. Like and subscribe, and comment. And I will see you guys in my next video. Peace. Boy, this video was a beast, man. Jeez.